So I'd open in another tab. Okay, well, let's not worry about that. Sorry, opening with a little technical thing there. My name is Matthew Stibber, and I'm going to be talking about the most common marketing mistakes that we see managed service providers, IT providers make, and how to avoid them. I'm so glad to see so many of you joining me this evening. Here in Chaos Cottage, I was reflecting today, we've just finished a big renovation project. This is not a big house, but I've got 7 access points, a network attached storage, 140 lights, another 30 or 40 IoT sensors, and 70 or 80 Wi-Fi connected devices, and I probably need some MSP support to manage it. That's more than I used to have in my business 20 years ago with 70 odd employees. Anyway, so without any further ado, let's get started. We are a marketing company. I'm coming from 25 years working for companies like Microsoft, Dell, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Symantec. I've been on the marketing side for vendors and also for more than a few dozen MSPs over the years, including, I was looking as part of research for this, at the top 50 in the UK according to various sources, and over the years I've worked for at least 10 of them. So I've got quite a lot of background in this. A lot of the contents of this has been prepared by my colleague Sam Bedell today, so hat tip to him. But the point is, I'm coming from a place of seeing quite a lot of things that people do and spending quite a lot of time looking at MSP websites and IT provider websites. So we do a lot of website work, we do a lot of branding, positioning, messaging, tone of voice, we do a lot of thought leadership content, AI search, demand generation. That's that. Right, advert over. If you would like, as a result of this conversation, to talk to me one-to-one for a free no BS marketing review, I would be delighted. I know some of our friends and clients are on this call, on this webinar. I can't do live chat on this. We're not going to open this up. It's just me talking, but I'm doing it live now. But I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to talk to you. You can email me, Matthew@Articulate-Marketing. You can book up a one-to-one 30-minute call with me, articulatemarketing.com/meet. Love to talk to you. Please don't be shy. We have more webinars coming up. This is almost the end of the parish notices. Lots and lots of interesting things that you might be interested in discussing. We've got webinars on the website, pre-recorded and upcoming every week. If you haven't heard enough of me talking at the end of this, there's plenty more. This is the agenda. I'll get right into it. Got quite a lot to cover today. Over the 20 odd years that I've been working with IT marketing, the MSP market has grown, professionalized, consolidated. I've seen a lot of clients being bought, merging, buying others. And most of the people that I look at and have worked with and looked at over the years are offering some combination of the same kinds of services, right? I mean, and you may recognize yourself in this list. There are others. There are also systems integrators and app developers and things like that. And we do quite a lot of work for SaaS companies too. But in the MSP world, there's some commonality. And the first sort of challenge mistakes calling your baby ugly, but the first thing we see very much is the assumption that technical competence and capability is a differentiator. So you look at most marketing by most MSPs, most websites, if not all, and they're basically going, look, we know all about this technology, this tech stack, this cloud migration or data security or something like this. And while you have to have those things, they are the price of entry. It is a bit like airlines differentiating themselves because they buy planes from Boeing or Airbus. Broadly speaking, they haven't got any other choice. And because they have well-trained pilots, well, they have no choice there either, because the aviation authorities make you have well-trained pilots. It's not differentiating. But the challenge, I think, is most, if not all, of these companies were started by technologists. So, and quite often they get their first commercial motor running by talking to other technologists. So, geeks talking to geeks. And so they assume that this is the thing that they need to be talking about. So The next challenge that we see, and if you are watching this and you're experiencing longer sales cycles, delayed dither and indecision, more complicated deals, more people being involved in the decision making at your prospects, more competition, more competitive RFP type situations, this is why, I mean, it's obviously there's an economic situation, an economic context to that, but the nature of technology has opened up competition very widely. There are, small and large companies are competing internationally, a bit like marketing agencies. And we do 40-50% of our work in the US, and here we are based in the UK, for example, and we're quite small, but we compete with 400-500 person agencies. It's the same thing with MSPs. And also there is, comparison sites, review sites. There's lots of data out there, and it's not just SEO anymore, it's AI tools, and these are helping people sort through. So there's a lot of competition, a lot of easy access to data and understanding who the competition is. So there's competitive intensity, and this means that differentiation and communication and marketing are essential for visibility. You just have to cut through that noise somehow. And there's this sort of fundamental challenge between what you or what MSPs think is important and what buyers see. So what you see looking one way through the mirror and what they see looking the other way. And fundamentally, most MSPs appear completely interchangeable. And back in the day, I was I did marketing for Microsoft for 20 odd years, but Articulate was providing a marketing concierge service that they were providing onto their partners. And so I did marketing reviews for 30 or 40 MSPs at the time. And when I asked them, what makes you different? Part of the conversation that I would have them, they would say, oh, we've got lots of certifications, we've got lots of vendor or credentials. We know what we're doing. We're very technically competent, and we're very nice people, aren't we? We're very friendly and supportive and responsive and good and all that stuff. And I'm sure that was really true. I'm sure it was very real to them. But they all said it, and their websites all said it, and pretty much in most cases, that's all they said. So internally, your strengths are obvious, but externally, they may not be differentiating enough. And here's the other thing that is a challenge, and this is the next sort of marketing mistake I think a lot of MSPs make, is misaligning what they're talking about with what actually drives switching. Because switching for a consumer of MSP IT services is quite expensive. It's time consuming to find a new vendor. There's a risk factor. The devil is often better. And typically, IDC did a survey of 2,600 buying organizations, and typically it's one of three things. The incumbent isn't making progress fast enough, meaning they're not delivering the outcomes that were expected in an efficient way or quickly enough. Secondly, the service quality wasn't there, so that they were fumbling the ball in various ways and it was annoying, or problems were occurring or whatever, or they were getting too expensive. But even when cost is the differentiator, because only one company can be the cheapest in the market, actually Whitelane did a bunch of research, and it's much more, when you actually dig into cost as a switching reason, it's framed a lot more around unit economics and value rather than just rate per hour. And so even with cost, it's really part of a cost value equation. And it's really hard looking at, as I did today, dozens of MSP websites to see anyone who's talking about cost, pricing, transparently. You've got to talk to somebody. Secondly, anyone who's talking about value outcomes. I mean, there's quite a lot of, we do this, we do that, but actually what? And then they tend to rely on case studies to validate that. But there's not a lot of, this is the thing that we do for you. There's quite a lot of conversation about service quality, but that service quality is usually substantiated by interchangeable capabilities and credentials. So it's actually quite hard to tell why one is better than another. That some vendors, sorry, some MSPs are putting up NPS scores, and they're putting up response rates, SLAs, and review scores, and that is an indicator. But there's not a lot of messaging around it. It tends to be quite data driven. It's not bold or distinctive. And anyway, you know, we're not as shit as those guys you're working with now is a pretty lousy sort of proposition. I think there needs to be something more positive. We also looked at MSP websites, marketing, branding, visually, right? And this is a very back of an envelope sort of Matthew survey. But out of the top 25 UK MSP homepages, of which I think 6 or 7 were former clients of mine, although we can't claim any credit or responsibility for this. This is looking at websites that we didn't design or build. Unfortunately, if you want a website, we can certainly do that for you. A small minority had pictures of office buildings of various kinds, or cityscapes, or here's our big office. We're, you know, big company, we've got lots of people. Very, very many, 10 out of 25 had what I would call shiny, happy office people. So, you know, sitting in an office looking very sort of gung-ho and exciting and young and dynamic. 4 of them, which is a smaller number than I would have thought, had what I call generic IT images, so a network rack or a laptop or something like that. And the rest were a mix of either sort of illustration, like there just wasn't anything visible, or diagrams, or there were quite a couple of this sort of dot neural net dot line sort of thing, which is really such a cliche. The point is, most of them are visually undifferentiated. Most of them are using color palettes that are very, very like tech blue is really, really common, tech purple as well. Of the 25, in my opinion, only 3 had distinctive visual identities and clear messaging. Right, all the others were visually and verbally on the homepage from a sort of 30-second glance by me, completely and utterly undifferentiated. And I can't claim any credit for this, but of the 3 that were differentiated, 2 had been former clients of ours. Okay, and I'm not going to tell you who they are. I'm not shitting for them. It was an interesting thing to see that. Right. So when differentiation is unclear, people tend to do one of 2 things, really. One of 3 things. They tend to default to price competition. So they go, who's going to be the cheapest? Because if the service is indistinguishable, undifferentiated, I'll just get the best price for it. Or they go for sort of the safe, familiar name. Nobody got fired for hiring IBM in some form. Or they try and minimize their risk, and typically they do that by delaying or deferring or being indecisive or querying the process or running RFPs and things like that. And that uncertainty and inertia makes your job to sell that much harder. And you need to break through that with some clarity of positioning. So let's talk a little bit about how they actually choose MSPs, how they, when they do decide they want to switch for whatever reason, what is driving that decision making, because that gives you a clue about what you should be saying to them, right? Not what you want to say, but what you think they need to hear. So buyers evaluate confidence, not just capability, right? So they're going to ask things like, do they understand organizations like mine? So vertical or sector specificity is really valuable and important. Secondly, they're going to look at, can I trust this provider? So some of those creds and confidence building and anti-objection messaging is important. And thirdly, they're going, can I justify this decision internally, which is usually a commercial risk, cost, outcomes, value, delivering against an internal agenda of progress and change. Some companies will run structured or semi-structured RFP processes. The reality is these 3 factors are going to still apply in an RFP. Doesn't automatically mean that the cheapest or the best technically qualified win. There was some research done by IDC and others, which I'm just going to summarize here. The actual decision-making criteria used fall into typically one of these 4 buckets, right? Can this provider deliver the outcomes we need? So IDC's research said that switching drivers framed this as sort of moving towards faster transformation, faster modernization, and improved service levels. So can they deliver what we need? And Whitelane's data in the UK pointed to business transformation and access to innovation, so new thinking, new ideas, and that's probably also very poignant at the moment when everybody's sort of tacking AI onto everything. Second thing is, can they deliver reliability? So consistent quality execution are differentiators if you can prove it, but probably are not in the sense that everyone is making very similar claims. Thirdly, can we govern them effectively and safely? So Deloitte talks about maturity gaps and how you can communicate things around KPIs and financial standing and risk allocation and prove that you're a safe pair of hands. I did a webinar a few weeks, maybe a month or two ago, about widening the mid-funnel. The point about that, at a very summarized level, is you need to be having your website and your marketing do a lot more of what would historically have been a conversation that happened during the sales process around anti-objection and around confidence building and technical credibility building, so that people can investigate this. And part of that process is to because people are doing more of their buying cycle online, but also part of it is surfacing it to AI to make sure that AI knows you do these things. And lastly, is this relationship going to be economically and operationally sustainable? Fundamentally, according to KPMG research, companies want their MSP partners to act as strategic collaborators and help them deliver outcomes to the business, not just be in the background fixing break-fix stuff and doing kind of routine things. They are looking for partnership behaviors, not just delivery capability and technical competence. So you need to be talking to those things, and most people don't. So there's a sort of mismatch between what the websites and what marketing people are saying, which is, we've got vendor certifications, vendor frameworks, vendor terminology. We're talking about technology. We've got some case studies that talk about, we deployed this thing into this company and we got this outcome. And it's very often, and this is the next big mistake that MSPs are making, very often the agenda of the vendors. It's Microsoft's agenda, it's Symantec's agenda, it's Hewlett Packard or HPE's agenda, it's Dell's agenda, right? Often because they're subsidizing or co-funding the marketing, often because it's easier to parrot that stuff, and often if you're driven to talk about your technology, you get the technology's information from the vendors and you end up talking about that. So actually, the more you do that, the more undifferentiated you become, because everyone else is doing it, right? If everyone's talking about Microsoft or vendor of choice, you're not different from them. And our experience, certainly when we did a lot more MSP work than we do now, was MSPs, especially small and mid-tier ones without their own marketing capacity or without investing in it, just carried a huge amount of water for the vendors and really didn't do enough for their own positioning and differentiation. So this is a fundamental challenge. The next thing that is a problem is, and I say this with great respect for techies, right? They don't like being summarized, packaged, repurposed, redescribed by marketing people. They think, this is a generalization, but they think the more detail and the more specificity and the more technical information they give, the more authentic they are. Because they are suffering from what I call the man or the person in the mirror syndrome, which is they think that the person who's reading their website is the same as them and interested in the same stuff and asking the same things. Not true. When somebody comes to a website, they're making a very, very rapid decision about, is this company, do they understand me? Do they look credible and competent? Is it relevant to our situation? Can they do what I want? They're looking for that hook, that information that will make them stay longer and get them engaged. So this differentiation has to land really quickly and really consistently across all of them, email marketing as well, advertising, and on the website. And increasingly, it has to land through AI-mediated overviews on Google search, on ChatGPT, on Claude, or wherever. You don't even get to control the presentation. Suddenly this verbal content, this written content and positioning becomes extra specially important if it's going to cut through that AI noise. And they need a reason to believe and to stay. So they need to have something that goes beyond, I've looked at another 10 companies on my long list, and here's another one that's basically saying, we've got great certifications, lots of lovely people, lots of things. Here's a shiny office full of, dynamic young people doing cool things. I go, okay, well, what's in it for me, right? So evidence of experience, and I think client tombstones can sort of provide that, client case studies, but there needs to be something more than that. Articulation of value is woefully lacking, right? Like talk the prospect's language, like what are you going to do for them? What's the difference you're going to make? Not how are you going to do it? The strongest position I have seen in MSPs, and it's not the only way of differentiating and positioning, by the way, but the strongest has been around industry vertical specialization. So companies like back in the day, Doherty focusing on cruise ships, or MSPs that focused on the restaurant sector, or on the best positioned MSP I ever came across was one that just did IT for dentists. Right? They had like 40% of the UK dentists were their customers. Fantastic. Yeah, the first 10 dentists you would sell IT services to, that's really hard work, right? If you're not specializing in dentists. But the 11th and the 100th, really easy, because we do it for all these other people. We know exactly what you need and how to help you and how to do a good job, and we talk your language. Or financial services. Our old client Red Pixie just they set up shop in the city, and they were talking to financial services companies about cloud transformation back in the day, and then they got bought by Hewlett Packard Enterprise for a bunch of money, and they're very happy. Specialization by sector. But there are others. There can be specialization around specific technology issues, challenges, services, or, and I think this is a really interesting one, around specific outcomes. Like, I think an interesting thing right now is getting stuff off the cloud, right? I think there's going to be a blowback to on-prem or quasi on-prem. I think there's going to be a really big opportunity right now in sovereign IT capabilities, right? So decoupling from unreliable allies, that sort of thing. But, finding something where you're really, really good at, and you tell that story. We know exactly how to do this complex thing that nobody else really does very well, or nobody else has thought about. Okay. So the next thing is they've got to win over their boss. And quite often the boss is not an IT person. So there has to be a conversation around business value, business outcome, ROI, cost, and positioning and clarity about that helps with that thing. And quite often the conversation stops at the technology, the conversation stops at the service level agreement, the contract, and doesn't really go, into some of the other factors that might be. And as decision-making units are getting broader, and you're seeing CFOs turning up at this and being involved, and senior management and risk compliance people, and there's a lot more involved in it than perhaps they used to be. Okay, so how do you begin to fix some of this stuff? And I think starting with positioning messaging has the highest leverage, and getting it right and get your positioning right, rippling that through all the comms and all the website and stuff, very, very high value. So start there. And start to think about how you communicate confidence, cognitive confidence, emotional confidence, narrative confidence. Can you demonstrate the commercial rationale? Can you give your IT interlocutor some evidence that they can take to their business decision maker seniors? And your messaging, your positioning has to support all three of these confidence axes. And most common problem in achieving that is, how can I put it? Some variant of we do everything for everybody, or we do quite a lot of thing for quite a lot of people. It's about trying to be as broad as possible, or we do cybersecurity services, we do IT support. And ironically, and I think I've encountered this multiple times in my career as a marketer, the pushback you get from senior people, from commercial people, is if we sort of narrow that down too much, we will lose potential deals. I make two counter arguments. You will gain more traction with the kinds of deals and the kinds of people that you want to do and the kind of work you want to do. One, so you'll get that. And two, you might rock up and say, no, we do cybersecurity on the Microsoft infrastructure for health organizations. I mean, really quite specific. We're dentists. We do dentists. Doctors will come through the door, right? I mean, vets will come through. You'll still get that drive-by traffic. So it doesn't really stop you. It just makes you look more credible. So it's about thinking about context, right? So we think that there's a framework that you can do where you start thinking about personas and ideal client profiles and thinking about the firmographic details. There's a really interesting book by David C. Baker called The Business of Expertise, which is a little bit more in my field of marketing than in the IT world. But he's talking about, ideally, for smaller businesses, you want to have a target total addressable market of about 5 to 10,000 companies, right? You want to be narrow enough that you are really valuable and indispensable even for those sorts of companies, not highly competitive service, commoditized services for millions of companies, because you won't cut through the noise. So think about who you are targeting. And the second thing is, what is their situation? What is their context that you can talk to? You can talk to regulation, right? You can talk to regulatory scrutiny as a requirement, and that might let you talk to financial services and lawyers and health, but there's something in common across those, for example. So pinning down the ICP, pinning down the sort of the situational trigger that makes your services valuable. And it would be so nice to see an MSP that had something that says, you might have an incumbent and they might be fine, but we've got something nobody else has got. We've got a reason you should come and talk to us as well. We've got a reason that you should initiate a conversation with us, not just 6 months before renewal. You talk about the outcomes that you can deliver, the things that you can achieve, and the differences that you can deliver for somebody. That is very powerful, and that is a way of kind of moving it forward. So this framework, we help this kind of organization who are experiencing of this kind of challenge, goal, need, problem to achieve this kind of outcome by doing this, right? Now, Simon Sinek, start with why, would say most MSPs are talking an awful lot about what and how, and almost nothing about why. And this definition, and you don't have to write screeds of content and pages to think this through. This definition starts with the why. We help these kinds of people achieve this, and there's a little bit at the end of reason to believe, methodology, the how, but that's at the end of it, just for reasons to believe. Okay, this grounds the marketing positioning in the buyer's reality, and it positions your services in a way that is ideally differentiated from your competitors, because you've understood your buyers and you've understood your difference. And working this through at a high level for whole organizations, or if you've got multiple service lines on a sort of service by service basis, is fundamental and critical. And then you have to align sales and marketing, which, sales and marketing sitting in a tree. This means having consistency across sales collateral, websites, product literature, sales proposals, presentations, and having it consistently aligned with personas, ICPs, positioning, mission, vision, values, messaging, platform, tone of voice, right? And we wouldn't start a website project, for example, without having gone through at least an understanding of all of that if it exists, or generating it if it doesn't. And if you don't start with that stuff, that positioning and marketing foundations, what tends to happen is the highest paid person's opinion dominates, and everybody starts talking about technology, and everyone starts looking at the competition and go, well, we have to have a vendor page, a partners page, and we have to talk about digital transformation, and we can't afford to be specialized or target particular audiences, or we need to have a page of vertical or a menu of verticals that has every vertical on it that exists in the world. And all of those things are failure modes because people have not faced up to the fundamental challenge. And then that all needs to translate out, even out into script. So I talked a little bit about that, but consistency is important because it builds trust. So consistency across all of those touch points. This is a formula that I think I'm going to close on. I'm conscious of time. I won't talk for more than another few minutes. I really like this when Sam shared it with me. He's put a little plus sign between high value and high variance, right? I think it's a multiplication sign. I think that if you can be really, really specific about where you deliver value and really, really specific about why you alone can do it, you multiply those two things up, you get a very powerful differentiation position. I would really recommend, if you get a chance and you want more on this, Google Sonia Marciano and look at her 2018 speech about enterprise value. She talks about competition and how you can differentiate and table stakes and so on. Really, really recommend that. It's another way of saying this stuff, but if you can pin this down, you will be 1 in 100 MSPs. So that's the end of the formal part of this. Again, please get in touch with me, Matthew at Articulate Marketing. Book up a meeting with me. Love to talk to you. I'm really grateful for everyone who's turned up today, and indeed you all turned up and you all sat through it. No drop-offs, which is bless you. So on that bombshell, I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and thank you very much. That is the end.